dig up a past I swore would stay buried.
You will always be a monster.
Ares! I have nothing more to hide.
The ghost of Sparta had been born.
Despite being known as the god of war, don't you think Kratos has more weaknesses than all the other gods? I'm not trying to get under your guys' skin. I know how much you all love Kratos, how much we all love Kratos, but just think about it. Beneath Kratos' tough exterior of white ashen skin, his battle-hardened physique, and his fierce facial expressions, there's a human side to him that can be challenged and can undermine his reputation as the god of war. Kratos has major flaws that make him a complex and nuanced character and depict his traumatic journey through all of humanism's dimensions. Before we get to his biggest weakness, his number one fatal flaw, I want to name a few others first, like illusions. To put it mildly, Kratos has a horrible past. Kratos' blood starts to boil through his veins every time any figure, especially his enemies, brings back eerie memories of who he was. His greatest adversaries can take advantage of and profit from the instant regret, wrath, and sorrow that accompany these illusions of Kratos' past. Kratos hates who he was in the past, so this makes sense. There are several examples of this in the God of War video games. In God of War 1, Ares weakens Kratos by showing him visions of his past and trapping him in an illusion where he has to protect his wife and daughter from evil versions of himself. Using this illusion, Ares manages to defeat Kratos temporarily and take away his blades of chaos. Ares would have won if Kratos had not seen the sword Athena's statue held at that very last second. In God of War Ascension, Kratos suffered from visions of his past in Sparta, and the Furies had him stuck and tortured in an illusionary trap for years before he escaped. Let's not even mention the illusion of Kratos beating his father to death in Helheim from God of War 2018. Kratos just stares at the fallacy in shameful awe. If it weren't for Atreus, Kratos would have probably been buried when the ship in Helheim crashed. Speaking of Atreus, I think he's also one of Kratos' weaknesses. Not his biggest weakness, we'll get to that later, but Atreus can be viewed as one of Kratos' fatal flaws. I mean, Kratos said it himself, he would easily let himself die to see his son live.
So you'd let me kill you?
If it meant you would live. Yes.
In God of War 2018, early sections of the game involved threats of Atreus' death, prompting Kratos to always be watchful and on the run for a safer sanctuary for themselves. Baldur specifically targets this emotional bond between father and son when he endangers Atreus' life and provokes Kratos into combat. This lessens Kratos' ability to focus during combat and decreases his effectiveness, but increases his rage. You might think, oh, but that's a good thing. No, and I'll tell you why later, just bear with me. Anyway, one of the issues in God of War Ragnarok is also how Odin uses Atreus against his own father by taking advantage of the divisions between Atreus and Kratos. Kratos' justifiable concern and commitment to defend Atreus at all costs becomes a vulnerability that his enemies might take advantage of. You know what else his enemies might use against Kratos? His need and fear of vengeance. Still, not his biggest weakness, but pretty far up there, Kratos' fear of vengeance makes him hesitant and weaker. A significant portion of Kratos' anguish and brutal suffering can be linked to his desire to slake his thirst for revenge. Even though Kratos' desire for vengeance is fundamental to his persona, it is also one of his greatest flaws because it drives him further into anarchy and the never-ending cycle of violence, which he fears greatly. For example, Kratos was hesitant at first to take on the role of general at Ragnarok. Why? Because he was scared of the consequences of vengeance. Thankfully, Kratos realizes that he was fighting for justice at Ragnarok and not revenge. The point is, although revenge was a central motivation for Kratos in the earlier God of War games, it is also an attribute that comes at a great cost, leading Kratos to suffering and emotional turmoil, which ultimately weakened his resolve. Okay, but what is Kratos' biggest weakness? His fatalist of fatal flaws. Kratos' single biggest strength, but also his single biggest weakness, remains his rage. Kratos' innate rage serves as a major source of motivation for him as he pursues his goal of retribution, atonement, and metamorphosis. Many times, Ares provokes Kratos' terrible memories with taunts from Zeus, and Baldur's lack of pain threshold makes the God of War furious. In God of War Ascension, one of the Furies constantly makes controversial remarks that incite Kratos' wrath. In God of War 2018, Modi breaks Atreus, which causes Kratos to become enraged and lose sight of some of his vulnerabilities in combat. Even though Kratos uses rage as a mechanical and narrative power aspect, when he is in that state, Kratos scarcely sees or values anything other than violence. Due to this, he poses a threat to both himself and everyone around him, including possibly his loved ones. While Kratos' rage can empower him in battle, it often leads to impulsivity, destructiveness, a loss of control, negative consequences for himself and others, emotional turmoil, and manipulation by enemies. This recurring theme highlights the consequences of unchecked anger in his life, contributing to the complexity of his character and serving as a central element of his character development throughout the series. Before you leave, consider joining the channel as a member. Join with demigod status to gain access to the Gods of War Council, where we can discuss your theories, ideas, and more. Other than that, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for more content just like this.
There's nowhere you can hide, Spartan. Put as much distance between you and the truth as you want. It changes nothing. Pretend to be everything you are not. Teacher, husband, father. But there is one unavoidable truth you will never escape. You cannot change. You will always be a monster.
I know. But I am your monster no longer.